Hello and welcome to Sync Music Matters, a podcast that explores the beautiful relationship between music and the moving image. My name's Jim Hostrip and I'm your host on this journey, as each week I chew the fat with industry professionals who, on a daily basis, work with music for visuals. Now you might immediately assume that I'm talking about composers, but I'm also talking about editors, music supervisors, directors, and anyone else who's involved with the synchronous process of pairing audio and visuals. In this episode, I'm talking to music supervisor and consultant Emma Middleton. Emma and I discuss how she went from studying English literature to setting up her own music supervision agency. We also chat about her work on the trailers for Thewitcher and Thecrown, how being proactive opens doors, her love affair with the music of John Powell, and leaving behind the javelin for music. So, Emma was voted Music Supervisor of the Year in 2020 at AIM Sync and was both a winner and finalist of the Music and Sound Awards for her work on trailers for Thecrown Seasons 3 and 4. Emma is a trailer specialist, music supervisor and consultant who launched her freelance business Rubato Music at the start of 2021. Prior to that, Emma was in-house at UK trailer agency Create. Emma enjoys discovering and applying unusual or unexpected tracks. She even keeps a curveballs folder. Also a composer, Emma occasionally jumps in and gets her hands dirty. Recent work includes a collaboration on the trailer for Thewitcher Season 2. Emma Middleton, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I feel flattered.
That's quite the credit selection. So the first question I always like to open with, if you were to sort of rewind a few years back to kind of your formative younger years, when you say between, 5 and 10 or whatever, if someone had asked you the question, what do you want to be when you grow up, what would you have answered?
I think I'm going to probably really bore you with this. I kind of knew exactly what I wanted to do. So it's not like, I wanted to be an astronaut or anything. I knew it was, I want to either compose or work with music for film and TV, which has since broadened to games. But I don't know about before 10, or I can only really remember from 10, 11, 12, which is when I started playing the piano. I was playing guitar before that, which I was all right at, but when I found piano, that was the thing. And then I don't know, I would always listen to, it's the really cliched thing, I'd be listening to scores in the car on holidays and things and picturing I'm in the scene or I'm in a scene that music is underscoring. So it's really boring, but I just set my mind to it.
But at the same time, nice to sort of have that focus from a young age. It took me 30 years to work out what I wanted to do. So, and as for in terms of sort of car journeys, wow, what sort of highbrow car journeys you were having listening to sort of film scores. I was listening to my mum's Jennifer Rush tapes and sometimes the Dirty Dancing soundtrack.
I don't know. It's just something about that connection of visuals and music that I mean, before it was all kind of whimsical, fanciful stuff. I don't know what I was picturing, but now it has to be a bit more analytical.
So were you conscious of that at a young age then as well? Because I sort of talk about my kind of love affair with music starting probably with film, was with Star Wars. But I don't think at the time, as I was probably at 7 or 8, I didn't realise what a huge impact the music was having on me, and that was part of the reason that I loved Star Wars so much. Were you conscious of that from a very young age, of the kind of the power of marrying sound with moving image?
That's a really good question. Possibly because I think I was trying to play some of the scores at the same time, so Pirates of the Caribbean or whatever it was, Twilight or whatever, I'd sit with a little TV in the corner or something and put it on mute and play whilst that was on. So there's definitely a fascination with it. And then when we moved, I was a bit older then, 14, 15, the house that my parents still live in, there's a glass door between the lounge and the strange dining room / piano room thing that I played in, and you could see the TV from there. So I would often just play and improvise and watch the TV at the same time. So I think I don't know when the switch happened. I was very into Harry Potter, so I obviously was listening to, not realising I was listening to big John Williams themes, and I don't know. I will think on that. That's really cool.
So that's interesting as well. So like, one of the other guests, Todd, that I've had on the show, he was talking about this love of music, but it was never really, certainly growing up in the Midlands, and certainly for me growing up in the North, like a career in music was never really an option. Did you have the idea sort of early on that I want to do this professionally and earn a living from it? And was that feasible? Were you encouraged in that way?
I'm from the Midlands as well, from a small like market town. No, I don't think I saw myself as like being the musician. I saw myself as like doing something with it. So like, I think being a musician, no, I didn't really. There were quite a few talented musicians like in my year and the year above. So like, I did see people kind of go on to do things or like aspiring for like quite like grand things with music. So, but then that also made me very aware that I wasn't as good at playing as them. So I was kind of like, how can I still do this without being the one that's got to be good at the instrument? I mean, I was fine. I like did my grades and stuff, but like, you know, when you hit a certain point and you're like, I don't think I can get better, quite reach what other people are at. So I started looking at things when I was in like sixth form or high school about music editing. I thought that was what I wanted to do. And then, yeah, a lot of stuff is like about America or it's about London. And I started looking at internships and things like that and trying to figure out how the hell do I do this. And then I saw like courses about composition for uni and things. And I actually avoided that because people steer you towards things that will be better for more careers. And now I wonder, like, if I'd done that, maybe that would have been a quicker way into it. I don't know.
So just going back then, so did you sort of studied music? Did you sort of like study composition, like do like A-level, GCSE A-level, and then...
A-levels, yeah. Yeah.
And did you then study at degree level or not?
No, I figured I could do music on the side. I was torn between music and English and French. And I went for English and I was like, I can do music on the side. I can't really learn literature and theory of literature on the side as well. So I don't know, that's not meant to be an insult to anyone that studies music because I wish I had, but no.
Yeah, I mean, it's surprising the number of people involved in music, myself included, who, I mean, I studied music from the point of view of like doing grades on instruments, but never actually studied music production or composition. And there's quite a lot of people out there who are the same. So what was your sort of path? And I'm always interested because I'm always conscious that maybe some people are listening who kind of want to get into kind of composition or want to get into music supervision. What was your route from sort of, you know, step by step to get to where you are today?
I don't know if it's like a standard route. It might be. Like I say, I was looking at internships and things, and I looked at them again in my first summer after my first year of university, and I found one at Create, actually. I went there for a couple of months and, you know, going to London from the Midlands and kind of being like, not knowing where anything was when you're asked to go on a run with a drive to Fox or somewhere, and getting used to that and being like, okay, I'm not really into London, but I love this place. I love the people actually take this kind of stuff seriously, which going back to what you said before, like when you say to people kind of in a smaller town or whatever, like, oh, I'm going to work in film or music, you can sense that the cynicism. And so being there with people that have been doing it for years who are actually working on these massive things, like Rafe Fiennes had been into the building like a few months before or something like that, and it was kind of that little taste of, oh, I could maybe do this. And if I'd had time, I would have tried a few other places or looked at like actual music internships, because I managed to get this because I thought I'll get something that links me to film somehow, to learn about the connection and how they use music, which in hindsight, I'm so glad I did because it was invaluable. But I then went back to uni and I just kept in touch. I think that was the key. It was just enthusiasm, eagerness to work there, having done a good job whilst you're in your internship and like leaving a mark, because you know that this industry is all about relationships, as much as I hate to say it, and connections. And if someone really does impress you, I think you remember them for years. And if something comes up, you will go the extra mile to try and get them a job or connect them with someone. So I'm glad I did that. And then I actually met Tom Evans from Audio Machine whilst I was there, because he used to work at Create, so I got connected. He's been a great friend and mentor of mine for years now, and I chatted to him about what I wanted to do, and I said about the music editing thing, and he was like, sounds like you probably want to be a composer or a music supervisor more than that. And so I went back to uni, invested in Logic, started trying to write for student films and things like that, and keeping that alive. And then when I finished uni, I moved to London, and I just kept like trying to keep in touch with Create. I got a job somewhere else for a year, but was always like on the lookout for something that would lead me back. And then it eventually did, like the stars aligned, I guess, and something came up where they needed someone to start looking after the music as well as doing something else. And then that was my way in. And then from there, like quite a few places in the UK, or at least how it might have been a while ago, there was no music role specifically. So it was like learning dribs and drabs from what everyone else had done over the years, where like producers have been doing music on the side, or the like production assistants and production managers have kind of been like putting music on the drive, and learning from editors about where everything was, and trying to understand what MCPS was and commercial and what library was what, and sorting all the system out and learning how to do searches and clearance, and just kind of learning the ropes from within the building. And when I occasionally went out and like, you know, just met my peers that are now like long-term friends, but just having to kind of be a bit of a sponge and ask questions and probably look a bit stupid sometimes, because if you're learning it, that I'd say that's the only downside from not going in through the music industry, is you're maybe not learning all the ins and outs and like copyright, like you're not learning that side of things that I kind of wish I had, but I'm still grateful for going in through the trailer side, because I think having worked with editors and producers like in-house is the way to go. So I guess my advice would be just to try and find, whether it's like an internship, some kind of trainee thing, or like junior level job in an editing environment, so that you're seeing why decisions about music are being made. Because if you're good at music and if you're pretty confident, I know how to pick the right music for this and this and this, you might be surprised to learn how it looks from the other side. So
yeah, and that's great what you say about being a sponge as well. It's something that's come up in some of the other conversations I've had, is bringing humility and curiosity to what you do, because that curiosity, rather than trying to sort of prove yourself or sort of be the big I am, it's like, okay, I don't know what that is, can you explain that to me? And that way you get to learn from people with sort of, you know, years and years worth of sort of industry experience, which sounds like exactly what you've done. You've just gone into the room and absorbed it all and then applied it to what you're doing on a daily basis.
Yeah, you don't really have time to do otherwise, to be honest. No. I mean, we'll probably get onto it, but just trailers, it moves so fast, you do not have time to sit there and pretend you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
I regularly just email people, like I've emailed you guys and just been like, I'm sorry, I think I'm describing this all wrong, or I had a search where I had to look at like garage music once, and I just emailed people and said, I have no clue what I'm doing here, but please can you help me? And you just have to lean on, I don't know, someone said to me like the best people surround themselves with people that are better than that know what they're doing, and if I get to the point where I can hire more people, that is what I'm going to do, because I don't profess to be an expert at clearance, so I'd rather have someone do that, for example.
Yeah, totally. The old adage that, for some reason, I always relate this to tennis, but if you want to get good at playing tennis, you play people that are better than you, because that forces you to raise your game, whereas if you play someone who's not as good, it's too easy. So, okay, amazing. So then let's delve into the world of trailer, but before we kind of look at a specific project, can you just sort of break down the process? What happens? So a studio starts, pre-production or starts filming a new film. At what stage? What are the different sort of levels of involvement from, sort of trailer houses to sort of music supervisors? Who are the people involved, and what does that kind of? And obviously it changes on a project by project basis, but what's the sort of rough chain of events that leads to you getting a search in for music?
Okay, I'll do my best, because obviously I'm kind of removed. Even when I was in-house, I was kind of removed from a bit of this, because so you have, when you're in the trailer house, the producers are like the kind of first bit of the chain. They are talking to the client, so say it's the Netflix marketing team or Studio Canal or whoever it is. They're talking to them about the plans for XYZ trailer. It might be the whole campaign. It might be that they've got them on a specific spot, or they might have you on something and not be telling you that they've got other agencies on the same brief. Like with composers pitching for something, it's kind of a similar thing, just take it a bit further up. And I apologise to any producers listening to this that I'm completely getting this wrong. You need to get someone else on. Then you have like the marketing plans and everything, and all the kind of trafficking side of when everything will go onto TV, if it's going on TV, radio, everything, when the trailer's going to air, all of that. So you've got the production side of things in the trailer house will be working out, okay, we need this done by then in order for this to be done then. The producers need to be aware that graphics need to have been finished by X date so that the editor can put them in for V1 to go to the client. All of that spinning, and amongst all those dates, obviously it's like, well, we need music in this trailer. Has the client already provided us music? Sometimes, like if the director's very into their music, someone like Edgar Wright, someone like that, they have more say sometimes. But sometimes it's like a playlist, or maybe there's some cues from the score, and maybe you look into augmenting them or just using them as they are. Usually you can't use them as they are because, as we all know, score just doesn't really work in the trailer format. With games as well, games trailers, that does happen more. The score from the game gets used in the trailer. I imagine that's probably because of the fan base, and the game composers put so much time into like this whole world of the game that maybe they composed something at the same time that was with the trailer in mind. Yeah. But for films and TV, the music kind of goes hand in hand with when you're talking about the edit. So you've got all this information from a client. Oh, Netflix want us to make X, Y, and Z. We've got to hit this market. There's usually some kind of briefing deck that's like, this is the demographic. We want to have these comp films. Like, this is the target, like location, or all of that kind of side of marketing that you'd expect. Sometimes music is mentioned in that brief. So it might be really in detail. It might be very brief, like we think hip hop will work or something, or it'll be like XYZ trailers use these tracks to great effect. We want to do something similar. So you might have something to work from there if the producer shares that with you, or the producers will interpret that themselves in line with what they and the editor want to do, and then bring you into the conversation. So does that make sense? Any part of that?
Yeah, so trailer house do the trailers, producers involved with that, marketing briefs, putting out searches, which sometimes, the marketing brief might be detailed or not. The searches come through to you of what they're looking for, and then presumably you then go out and with your sort of network of music providers, whether they be sort of publishers or production music houses or trailer music houses, whatever, you'll go through, so that's an interesting thing. Do you go onto their database and start searching, or is it usually a case of you've already downloaded lots of music you're constantly on the lookout for music that you've sort of brought in and sort of go, oh, that could be a good one if that gets made, that could be a good one, then that gets made. And so start drawing on all these sort of different ideas that you've got and putting together things that you think would work?
Yeah, mix and match of both. So obviously you can't always be on top of every bit of music. So there's there's always some element of having stuff you've already got and reaching out to people or searching libraries or whatever. Sometimes if you're at that stage where the producer goes, we aren't quite sure how this should sound, or could you give us something to kind of like get the ball rolling, and then before you like launch into something and spend a day trying to find stuff, you can kind of go, oh, what about this but less electronic, or what about this but less swaggery, and this, and try and like start. You have this pyramid, which I'm sure everybody talks about, but like you start at the bottom and it's really broad, and you could go in so many avenues, even if it's quite a specific brief. Like even if it was just hip hop, like is it like huge, like Fast and Furious kind of epic trailerized hip hop, or is it quite like, you know, quite static throughout, or whatever's happening? Is it female, male vocals, blah blah blah? So you start in this place, and then every question kind of gets you towards the top of the pyramid. Like you're just chipping away at it basically, and the more questions you ask, and the more you know how to preempt how wrong it could go if you went in a certain direction. Or having done briefs before, you'd be like, oh, I've tried that for a comedy, it just feels cheesy. I've done that for a drama before, it just, everyone does that. Or then you can be more advisory, and that's why I say I'm a supervisor and consultant, because usually there's an element of, here's like a bit of getting the ball rolling. Like I said, you give a few prompts, and then it kind of opens up.
And so when you've got these sort of musical ideas and you're submitting them, who's choosing them? Is it the producer or the editor, or both? Who's the gatekeeper on the sort of like the ideas that you send out, do you reckon?
Combination. It depends on the trailer house or how busy the producer is, because if the producer's got like 5 different jobs on, and they might be like, I'm leaving this with you to the editor. So I'd say usually the producers kind of defer to the editor on what they're thinking, but it will be a conversation. So like obviously the editor's the one cutting it, but if the producer disagrees, they will say so. If they listen first, they might kind of cull what I've sent before it goes to the editor. Really depends, or just everything will go to the editor, and then they'll say, I love 157 of this list or whatever, and then the producer then listens and agrees/disagrees, and then that you either start cutting with things. You might have been given free creative reign to just present and edit however you want to do it, or you've got to clear the music choice with the client before you cut anything. So there may be quite a few stages, or it may just be me and an editor doing something and then showing the producer the edit after. Okay,
and then hoping that they buy into it. And as well, it sounds like, so you sort of mentioned the idea of pitching in the same way that sort of, you know, if an ad brief comes through and it sort of sends out to composers, the composers can be sort of competing against any number of sort of different composers. Similarly with this, it sounds like the trailer houses are sort of doing multiple cuts of trailers that they're sort of pitching to the sort of studio. But then beyond that, then there's sort of like supervisors who are pitching lots of music to the producers and the editors. And then you've got the sort of the music houses that are sort of putting together playlists and pitching music to the supervisors. So I suppose that's the pyramid, isn't it? It sort of eventually sort of gets refined down to the sort of like the top. And when you said up as well about sometimes you get a brief where they're very specific, you know, the marketing is very detailed, they know exactly what they want, and sometimes it's a bit more vague. Which is easier for you, or which do you prefer? Vague, where you've got carte blanche to sort of go crazy, or kind of more specific because hopefully you can be a bit more targeted?
I think I like vague if the rest of the brief is really fulfilled. So because I'd rather be left to decide what kind of music works, because that's literally my job. That's not meant to sound arrogant, but like, you know, that is what I'm meant to do. So if the rest of the brief covers all the other questions I would be asking the producer, or if the producer has since found all those answers out and can tell me, what I mean by that is like the shape and movement of the edit. How am I like visualizing how this edit moves. That is just number one for me, because you can give me everything, and usually I do get these like huge detailed briefs with so much information. It's like it might even describe the genre of music or everything, but there's always usually one thing, and I'm like, what's the pacing of it? Because like quirky and upbeat or whatever, you know, it could have different BPMs. It could be like really in your face. It could be like Wes Anderson type, like chaos. Like there's such a spectrum of every kind of musical term. But what's the editor thinking in terms of, is it going to open and be kind of exposition, like very slow, steady? It's more kind of broad, overarching narrative of the edit, which is the thing that I think people take for granted sometimes. It's like, oh, we've got all this information, but that bit is the crux of doing a music search.
Yeah. And I suppose quite often are they sort of saying, well, we don't know, we're going to wait and see, the music will inform that. So.
Well, yeah, it is a bit of like give and take. It's like the briefs I get, they're brilliant, and they answer so many things I would have to ask, or they don't leave you in the dark, like just find some music. There is like direction in certain elements, but I don't know if it's how I work personally. I don't know if any other supervisors do this, but I think it's from being a composer. It's like I can't, like, I can go off and find you things in that genre, and I know the tone you want, and I know the mood you want, I know the emotions you're trying to convey. That's amazing, you've given me all that information, but I can't like feel it. I can't, like, how is the intro going to like feel and move you, and like, is there like a steady pulse, or is it quite hectic, and how is that going to lead us into the next act?
Well, it sounds almost like you're talking in terms of what emotions do you want the audience to feel when they start watching this? Is it sort of like a calm, or are we starting big? Are we starting heavy? And then what happens? Is it frantic, or is it kind of more? So, like, I mean, we'll talk about it in a bit. But the Bob Dylan cover for the Crown trailer that you did, which is quite haunting. There's a haunting element to the trailer as a result. So if you can sort of tap into what emotions you want the audience to feel when they're seeing it, that then goes some way to informing the pace and the tonality and things like that. That provides a perfect segue into sort of like getting under the skin of a particular project. Under the skin. Let's maybe start with a project you worked on recently, Thewitcher. And I think the great thing about this is that you were sort of involved in the sort of composition of this as well. I think this is kind of unique, because this is the thing about this podcast, is the idea is, you know, when you think of music in the moving image, you tend to think composers, but actually there's a whole gamut of people involved in this. And I always think that editors are much more involved than people give them credit for, music supervisors, sync agents, whoever. And obviously you're coming from two different camps. You've got your supervisor and consultant hat on, but then also being a composer yourself. I think that kind of places you quite uniquely to have a slightly different take on it. And obviously the Witcher season 2 trailer you were involved in with both. So yeah, talk us about, you know, the process of that. How did that come about, and what led to because it's a Fleet Foxes, isn't it, remix?
So this job started as Supervision, and a very thorough brief. Like, the producer on this is amazing. She knew exactly what was needed, but also she knew what was needed because I think they had tried a lot of stuff, and they weren't like, no matter what was being thrown at it, I think the feedback was like more, you know, when you're doing a trailer remix, it's like more intense, more threat, more drama, more high stakes. And nothing was quite hitting all the spots that it needed, like the lyrics, the brooding intro that did the kind of set you in that world, and then went into this huge thing at the back. And I was obviously thrilled to be on the search. So you said earlier, do you store things and you're like, oh, that'll work if such and such comes up. I had a little folder of stuff where I was like, if I ever get to work on The Witcher, this is what I would put in it.
Is that your curveballs and covers folder?
No, that was for The Crown.
Okay.
The This one was just like me tagging stuff and being like, that sounds like The Witcher.
So there was no talk of Fleet Foxes prior to that. It was you sort of had Fleet Foxes sort of...
No, I didn't come up with Fleet Foxes. Within the search brief, the producer had said, we've tried a cover of Your Protector by Fleet Foxes, but it just wasn't quite right. And then I reread the lyrics because I hadn't heard the song for a while, and I was like, oh my God, that is just... We can't beat that. Like, those lyrics are just perfect. And then, so I did the search, because obviously first and foremost my job was to do the music search, so I did a bunch of options, and they liked a lot of stuff. There was just something wasn't quite there on everything, and I knew that as well. Like, I did the search and I was like, don't feel like it's gonna beat the idea of Your Protector. So I was like trying to ask/subtly force the idea of doing custom. I basically just took the a cappella from it and then worked with, I obviously couldn't tell him what it was, but just said, can we try this? My friend Kieran, who I did Thecrown with, but we've since become really good friends since that, and we have a really good working relationship, and I was like, just trust me, please just try this idea with me. So we got the a cappella and just put it over like it's not too dissimilar from how it's ended up now, kind of a droney bed, a little bit like how the Crown open is, quite haunting booms and everything, and just scoped it into the trailer universe basically. And his voice, like I said to the producer, Kieran and I can hear this voice with reverb on. It's got that kind of folk, obviously it's a folky band, but like it's got this medieval almost feel to it, and like you can picture him standing on a hill and singing this in the Middle Ages or something. It's got something about it. So we whacked on reverb and we got it up to a point where there was a little bit of a riser, and like it was like, oh, what's going to happen? And then we only had the intro done. Sent that to the producer and was like, just for an idea, really quickly, just mock this up. And then didn't hear anything for a little bit. And then she was like, I really like that. Let me get back to you. They came back and said, we kind of see what you're trying to do, but it needs to be more like this. The word that kept getting thrown around was threat. Like, there just needs to be more and more. And even though I work in trailers, it was more than I realised they needed. Like, when I'd done the search, it was just on another level of like darkness and threat. And we basically just tore up the end of it and just redid it. I did some string pattern, like running stuff, because we needed movement and all the string patterns, and then we started like emulating that in the drums. That we had this I don't know if it was me or Kieran, one of it, this it was like a 5-note and a 6-note pattern. There's both are in there, but we had that in something which I think was in the drums that Kieran had done, and then I was like, oh, we should put that in cellos and things, and add and some like Bartok strings, and like add this attack and just have it as this. It's kind of like a knocking on the door kind of effect.
Well, this is something that there's always quite prevalent in trailers. There's quite often a ticking clock or something that's doing some ticking, because it's sort of there is that sort of sense of anticipation and that something's going to happen. But there, what you're talking about there, when I watched the trailer, that's the thing that I remember. That's the hook. Well, aside from the sort of the Fleet Foxes vocal, but that sort of little recurring pattern which happens sort of percussively with Bartok and things like that. That's the hook. And that's the bit that I remember from the trailer. So it's kind of, this is always something that kind of, as writers, we're sort of going, okay, what's the hook? What separates this from the other bits? When people think of this piece of music, what's the bit that they're going to remember? And that's the sort of critical element. It's simple, and it can be melodic, but it also, in this instance, like purely rhythmic, and it works so well.
Oh, thanks. We didn't know if anyone would pick up on it. That's interesting. But the editor actually called it and said, can we allude to it earlier in the track? And the editor and the producer, like, were so specific with the notes they wanted. We were very lucky, especially in that turnaround, to have very, very prescriptive changes. Like, at this time code, can you do a dun drum instead of...
Yeah, and it does make life easier, doesn't it, when the notes that you get are quite specific rather than sort of really vague and wishy-washy, like, can you make it more yellow or a bit bigger, dynamic? Well, it's like, yeah, but what does that mean?
Yeah, no, it was great. It was the most fun I've like had, and not even in work, like just on anything. It was so much fun.
Yeah, I mean, The Witcher Season 2, the trailer's incredible. Obviously, I wanted to touch on as well the Thecrown. I think it was Season 3, wasn't it, with the Bob Dylan cover, which, award-winning. What about this thing of the covers? Because it seems to me, increasingly within the trailer world, that covers, it's just more and more covers. Are you seeing that as well?
Yeah, I have this year. I feel like I've had more cover briefs than when I was at Create. I don't know. I think people are trying to do it differently. That's always the thing in trailers. How can we, reinvent the wheel kind of thing? But yeah, I do think there are more. But a lot of instrumental covers as well, like trying to do something recognizable with like a weird upfront string thing or.
Well, it's interesting as well. You say that kind of like trying to be different, that people sort of want to do things differently. And I know this is something that, from talking to you, this is something that's important to you, is like you're always looking to do sort of unusual things. And you had a folder for Thecrown 3, which was called Curveballs. But it's great because I think, certainly creatively, that's for us creatives, that's where the most excitement lies and value lies, is when we can start to sort of do things differently. But it actually sounds like, certainly within the trailer world, that people are very kind of open to that and actually actively looking for it.
Yeah. I think, especially with the best teams, they, listen to things that might sound a bit off the wall and strange. When it's like a safe space to throw ideas, you do, it's like any industry. You will get the best results if people don't feel they're going to be judged for saying them, or they've been given creative free will, rather than giving a supervisor the parameters in which to work and letting them go from there is the best way. So that's what I've said before is why I did the Crown little curveballs idea, because it was kind of like, shall I segue into just talking about that now anyway?
Go for it.
We hadn't got the episodes in yet, so we were just told we were going to be working on it. So I just watched the previous trailers and then listened to bits of the score, and basically just went from there. Was kind of like found my parameters, but like where do they stretch the limits to, like how there's like synth elements and vocal pads and things, how electronic does it go, and like where is the market, like where do you stop with that, and how orchestral does it go, and where do you stop with that, and then you find your little Venn diagram in which to work kind of. So the thing with the Crown is that it never went to it didn't feel too traditional. That's something that Peter Morgan dictates, is that it doesn't want like it to feel like a period drama kind of strings piece. Like it's like, with Hans's score and with Martin, and I feel like there's been several composers on it, and now I feel awful, I've forgotten the third one.
I can't help you, sorry.
It has all the elements of orchestral, but it does what Hans does. It's like very deep strings and brass and things, and it's like swells, and you don't hear the attack of all the instruments. It's like this kind of wall of sound, like he does so well. So it was finding somewhere in that, and then it was like, how can we be a bit new on this trailer, thinking about vocals instead of just instrumental tracks. And then I remembered Kieran had made that cover for me for something else that didn't go ahead at some point, and I was just like, oh, he's the guy that does everything in that kind of world. That's the perfect sound world for this. And then I remembered that track, and it was just like, this.
You knew. Well, I suppose lyrically it lends itself. It sounds like, that series of The Crown, there's sort of major change going on that the Queen is wrestling with, and obviously the Bob Dylan track Times Were Changing just sort of fits beautifully into that lyrically. Yeah, amazing. I just quickly Googled Rupert Gregson Williams.
Yes. Oh, yeah, of course.
I didn't realise there was such high profile composers on the Crown. I didn't realise Hans Zimmer did the theme tune either.
That's why it was quite intense. It's like, right, okay, we need to be in the world of Hans Zimmer.
Yeah.
Like within a trailer. Yeah, the music is great, and it's very steady. There's a very regal feel to it. It's a processional kind of like steady, and that's the thing when I talked about the movement and the shape of an edit. There was no way this edit was going to be chopping and changing like frantic. If you watch any of the others, it's got like a sex appeal to it almost. It's like very sultry and very, just very kind of slow burn. And you kind of reach the back end sections before you realise you're in them. That kind of thing. It's like a long riser that you don't realise is a riser.
Yeah,
that's the best way I can describe it.
That's a sort of shepherd tone going on in the background. And it works really well, and again I think really kind of captures that. It feels different. It feels which is great, because there is a formula to trailer music generally. Your 3-act structure and some big drums and things, but when you get to sort of do things and be a little bit irreverent is a sort of term I always kind of apply to this. It's and I think makes it more memorable, because you think of a lot of other trailers and they sort of tend to blend, speaking sort of, let's say, Marvel Universe, they're kind of very similar and they sort of blend into one another, whereas when you get the ones that stand out, it's like, oh hello, that's really interesting. Under the skin. It'd be great to just sort of get an understanding for kind of what moves you musically. You sort of talked about as a kid you sort of listened to movies, film soundtracks and things like that. What kind of, is there a particular type of music or anything that really gets you going, that really resonates with you above all else?
John Powell.
Oh, really?
I just adore John Powell. If ever I'm feeling low, I would just listen to his music.
Like How to Train Your Dragon?
Yes, particularly. I've listened to a lot of his stuff, but they're just masterpieces, and they get better, each one. He even said, I think I got better at doing choirs when he got to the third one. But he just is an absolute genius in terms of mirroring visual, emotional storytelling, the way that it intertwines with the visuals. And people laugh when I say How to Train Your Dragon is my favorite series and my favorite score, but it is just go, if you haven't, go and watch and listen to it, because it's incredible. The journey he takes you on, he's got most of the films start with this huge vibrant energy, there's some kind of game going on at the start or whatever, but then takes you to such dark places, and then he's really good with vocals. He's got a whole choir album, really really good classical writing, but
well, what he does really nicely with that score as well is he sort of blends in Celtic elements as well. So you'll sort of have kind of real Celtic flavours running through a traditional sort of orchestral score, which he does so subtly and so beautifully.
I think the thing about his music that I tend to like in other pieces of music, if you're saying what moves me, is either extremes of emotion or a sense of deep rooted emotion. So either something big and sweeping, his huge, they're flurries of musical activity, or there's a track from X-Men called, I think it's I've forgotten her name, the girl with the white strip in her hair. It's her theme. There's a theme on top of where Hugh Jackman's saved her or something on top of a building, I don't know, and it's just this beautiful, it's just this huge flowering piece. And the same with Murray Gold. I love Murray Gold's usually suspensions. I'm a sucker for a suspension, and then some kind of sustained idea that's like I say, it's deep-rooted emotion that's either kind of subtly portrayed for a while and you can feel it, and then it like bursts into something massive.
Yeah,
like trailers.
Like trailers. Well, quite no coincidence that you're involved with trailers. And is there a piece of music which will, hands down make you cry every time you listen to it?
It's probably a John Powell one. I think there's one called "Should I Know You" from the second film, or any of the ones, because he's so good at. Like, if you've seen the film, then I'm just seeing the film whilst I'm listening. So, like, any of the ones where there's a really sad moment, and I don't want to spoil it if people haven't seen it. So, yeah, any of those moments make me cry. But the one thing that is, I don't know if it's the music that makes me cry or the show that makes me cry, but the first ever bit of media to make me cry was a Doctor Who episode. So Murray Gold again. The one called Doomsday, where the Doctor and Rose get parted with the big wall between them. I'd never cry. I was like, I don't cry at films and TV or adverts. And then that happened, and it's like Chandler and Friends or something. It just opened this like floodgate. And I don't know. Murray Gold is a huge influence of mine though, and that it's just this like dead kind of funereal pace underneath, and this haunting vocal, and it just gives me chills still if I listen to it.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well, isn't it? It's like, is it the if you listen to the music in isolation, would it do that? If you watch this scene without music, would it do that? Or is it just a combination of the two that kind of creates the recipe, the right cocktail of emotions to get the floodworks, the tears flowing, waterworks? That was the word I was looking for.
Yeah, I think the combination, and I guess that's why I do what I do, because I love that kind of magic recipe that put two things together and what you can make someone feel if you, like with a cake or something, you ate like eggs and flour on their own.
Yeah, totally. Singularly unimpressive. It's like on their own, but you put them together in the right combination and you've got something pretty special. And is it, obviously there's lots of music you do like. Is there any music that you don't like? Is there anything that's sort of like, if it sort of comes on a stereo or whatever, that you'll just reach for the skip button or something like that? Or do you just literally like everything?
No, I don't like everything. I've learned to appreciate a lot of things doing this job, like the use that things can have and that other people like it. I'm not into like really modern pop music. I know that's quite a broad stroke, but like, basically anything that's probably trending right now, I'm not into. I'm not saying that to try and be cool, like, oh, I don't like what the cool kids like that kind of thing. I just doesn't do anything for me.
Auto-tuned vocals.
I don't know, stuff that's like about being at a club, like lyrics about house music and EDM and probably heavy metal. I have to be careful, like, I don't know, saying what I don't like as a supervisor, but there's quite a lot I don't like.
Yeah, which is fair enough. It's one of those things, and this is why I'm interested in the question, because obviously, in whatever area, if you work with music, nobody is immune to their own personal preferences. In fact, if ever I'm working with a director on a film, I'm always interested to know what they like personally, what they listen to, even though it's possibly not right for the film. It goes some way to informing someone's musical taste, and then if you're sort of trying to then sort of second guess that and work with something, then I think that's really helpful. But yeah, I think it's okay to not like other stuff. I've always had a very weird relationship with music in that I'm very, very particular about what I will and won't listen to. And I think the weird thing about pop music is generally kind of, it's generally fashion led. It's very sort of quite generic, and there's sort of, I've got to be careful what I say now, but I don't care. Painting by numbers, but it's done for a mass market. It's created for a mass market. It's done to have mass appeal. Whereas I was always someone, and I think probably you were too, someone in the background sort of going, okay, well, that's fine, but what else is there? And then when you start digging and listening to other music, you go, hang on a minute, this is miles better. So why would I just sort of have that stuff that's sort of played over the radio, outdated, but certainly playlists, when actually if you go digging you can actually find some wonderful stuff which thinks outside the box and breaks the formula and does it in a way that kind of engages you emotionally that maybe a pop track might never do. And that's nothing to say is wrong with pop music. There's some great pop music out there, but
and I do like dip in, like there's some tracks I'll listen to and be surprised by that I like it. I come across various things when I'm working and I'd be like, oh, I should hate this, but I really like it. So I think just, you can never really rule out a whole genre, but...
Well, I probably can, actually.
What's your hate and love?
I struggle with house music because I love rhythm, and then to just have a four to the floor going for sort of 4 or 5 minutes just seems a waste. And for some reason, the reggaeton just winds me up. Just that, again, it's the repetition of the beat. I think I need variety and rhythm to keep my attention. So yeah, reggaeton and house. I mean, I could go on. There's loads of stuff that winds me up, but I just know what I like. And then there's other stuff I sort of think,
How do you feel about trailer music with like stuff that has a very steady beat running through it?
Well, it does have a steady beat, but it also there's a real journey to trailer music. It's constantly ebbing and flowing and stopping and starting, and I mean sometimes to a point of like kind of blowing your mind. And this is something difficult because with the group of writers that I work with writing trailer music, it's like, how bonkers do you make a track? Because when you watch the final edit of a trailer, quite often the music has been cut up, so it's barely recognizable as the original track. But to try and write a piece of music that works like that is probably not doing justice to it being a piece of music. So I think for us, it's always a case of stay true to the piece of music, tell a story, take someone on a journey, build me up, drop me down, create tension, drop it, etc., and then let the editor or the producer or whoever it is then sort of go to town on that. But no, I mean, I love trailer music from that point because I think it's got a lot to give, and I love it has steady rhythms, but it's also those rhythms sort of change up. It's not just if it was just sort of like 2 minutes of ticking clock, then I'd be like, come on guys, you could do better than that.
I am done with ticking clocks, to be honest.
It's one of those things we all sort of go, well, let's not do ticking clock because that's been done before, but yet you just keep hearing it. So it's like, well, all right, let's put a clicking clock in there. Or just...
piano pings.
Yeah, or Bartok, Bartok pits or something like that. Just something that's ticking, but it isn't a clock. And if you, again, sort of like, musically, I think we're kind of always informed by what's come before. And, growing up, it sounded like it's amazing that you used to sit there watching TV and playing along to the sort of TV. But are there certain soundtracks or albums or artists that, have been kind of seminal in terms of your musical influences over the years?
If I avoid score, I mean, I do heavily listen to scores, but Turing Breaks is my favourite band that I discovered around that time where I was kind of shirking off pop music and kind of being like, I did love pop music for a while, and then when, like you say, I started realising, what else is there? What do I actually like? Am I actually enjoying listening to this stuff? And then I've actually found Turing Breaks through a sync in Doctor Who, in a Doctor Who extra episode. So it's just been really strange. Like, it's been this weird spiritual kind of full circle thing to now work in sync and have met the band, and I've written a cover of my favourite song of theirs with Kieran, actually. So their music, I mean, I don't think I'm their normal fan base age. I'm a little younger because they were quite big when I was growing up kind of time. So I don't know how familiar you are.
I was quite surprised that you knew who Turing Breaks were before, because they were sort of quite a bit before time, but yeah. Yeah,
no, I love them. Just really incredible lyric writing, which I didn't realise I was into, but when you listen to good lyrics, you really notice, like Bob Dylan, I mean, just genius stuff. And then there's just something about, I think, like I said, I'm a sucker for suspensions and huge, emotional, climaxes within a music and stuff, and that their piece, Long Distance, is my favourite song, which is the one I've covered, and it is it's this slow, brooding. I'm only noticing during doing this podcast that all my tastes do relate to trailer music that I had genuinely not realised till right now. But it's this brooding, emotional, very dark and haunting. It's like the lyrics are, vultures are circling around my head, about running out of time and that kind of thing. And again, my trailer brain was like, I should make a cover of this. But and then it stops and it goes into this huge, I let somebody Get Under My Skin, and it's about like long distance losing and everything like that. And it was used when the Doctor and Rose like have this really emotional kiss, but in a behind the scenes featurette thing, which is really strange. Not even in the main show, just in this, all the actors are talking about this emotional bit in the show. And I said before, I cried at the scene where they got separated years back, and then that bit happened, and I was watching them like kind of kiss again and reunite, and it's that music, and I was like, what is that? And because it was before I could properly find out through YouTube and stuff, like, or Shazam or anything like that. I know I'm very young, but it was still before I could properly do that. And I don't know how I found it. I must have been Googling, because I couldn't repeat the show or anything. So I was like, what were the lyrics? And trying to find it, somehow found it. And then went through their back catalogue and then got into like some similar kind of stuff like Doves and a bit of Elbow and like that kind of world. So yeah, Turin Breaks.
Turin Breaks, there you go, seminal album. What's the name of the album? I'm going to link to it in anything that we've mentioned here, and I'll link to in the show notes.
The album that one's in is Ether or Ether Song, okay. But the main album that everyone talks about is The Optimist. Okay. Which is great. I love everything. So
yeah, I think I'll have to revisit Turin Breaks after this here. And what about from a sort of like a visual perspective? Obviously, you love trailers, but what sort of stuff do you like watching?
Well, I like The Witcher, so
of course
that was a dream come true.
Especially season 2.
Sci-fi and fantasy, sci-fi that really like makes you think or is quite dark, like a Her or Ex Machina and that kind of thing. Nice. Stuff that's kind of just very cleverly written, even though it's maybe a genre I might not like. So like The Punisher. Yeah. If anyone's not watched the Marvel, well, it's Marvel Universe, but you don't realize it is. Like, it's just very cool guy that
violent
people, but that's not what I thought my kind of thing was. But it's just really smart writing. But then again, so to kind of transition a bit from film and TV, I love kind of watching / so I'm really into games as well. So my husband and I play games as if we're watching a series. So kind of like, like tuning in to get the next episode or whatever, we just play a section. So there's a game that's a bit like The Punisher, Wolfenstein, which obviously people might know from the older games, but I've played the newer ones. Again, the storytelling, it's just brilliant writing and really fun to play.
Dark. It's dark as well, because I think you've obviously sort of like the darker side of stuff, and as particularly like trailers tend to always be pretty dark as well. So there's obviously that. So, but then there's so much. I recently found myself as well. I've had to take a bit of a break from it because everything I watched on Netflix is dark. It's like Nordic noir, murders and stuff like that. And I get to a point where I'm like, I just need to watch something nice for a change.
How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah, How to Train My Dragon. Exactly. Are there any sort of productions coming up in the sort of next year or so that you're excited about releasing?
So The Last of Us, the TV series. So like I said, I'm into the game. Oh, if I could work on the trailer for the series, that would be great.
Nice.
But I'm really excited because they've got have they got the writers? They've got the director from the game working with the director of Chernobyl. So very exciting. And like they've been posting little teasers of like images and things like that, and it looks like the game. And basically I think what they're doing is like extending the narrative. So like there's already, like myself, massive fans of the original story, but I think they're gonna go into little bits that they didn't manage to fit into the game or just things like that. So it's like a kind of like a spin-off at the same time as being a retelling of the story, because the game's already cinematic and has amazing cutscenes and stuff, so you can't really just mirror that because it will look very similar. But they've got their composer on it. They've got Gustavo Santaella on it, like on the game as well. So
awesome. I sort of nerd out over kind of like weird little bits of information about sort of music and or film, like, you know, little random facts that people don't know. Do you have any random? If you don't, it's fine because I've got loads. Do you have any random trivia facts about film scores or music or film, TV?
I don't think not to sound like a repeating record or anything. I know it's not even trivia. I just know one thing that interests me about how John Powell works, which made me feel better about how I work, is that he writes 2 bars at a time.
Oh, really?
Because I used to kind of, I even now when I write stuff, I'm like, oh, I should be thinking about the big picture and the overarching thing and how I'm starting the melody here and I'm going to reinvent it there and whatever. But I've watched so many interviews with him, and one of the things he says is that he'll write 2 bars, write the next 2, and then if you re-listen to it, you can tell, like, I think that's why I love it so much, because it's just like nuts. Sometimes it's just like all over the place. He's got strings and it's like all this stuff is like going mad, and he gets told off for overwriting, but he does it anyway, and they just pull the mix down. That's what they did in Bourne, in the scene where Matt Damon's in Algiers, and like that. It's a really long piece if you listen to it on its own, but he did this thing with like loads going on, and I think they just pulled the mix down because it was too busy. But I just love that. But yeah, he writes 2 bars at a time, so now I'm like, if it's good enough for John Powell, it's good enough for me. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we can be very prescriptive about how things should be done, but everyone's got their own kind of style and approach, haven't they? And that's interesting as well, because I suppose, particularly if you were to think of something that's through composed, I think I probably suffer the opposite. I tend to sort of work in sort of 8 or 16 bar sections, but that just sort of means that I've generally got sort of chord sequences that sort of repeat throughout that, whereas actually to boil it down and go, okay, 2 bars at a time, and you sort of think about, you know, the old Tom and Jerry cartoons of the sort of 60s, 50s, 60s, where the music is constantly changing. There's no repeating motifs really, it's just constantly underscoring what's happening. You wouldn't be able to do that by thinking about the bigger picture. You literally just have to tackle the visual and what's going on sort of 2 bars at a time. So that's, interesting. And yeah, great that you mentioned the Bourne, because that was my first introduction to John Powell, and I love that trilogy of films, and his score that was the first time I was introduced to him, and it was amazing.
Well, go on, tell me some trivia.
Are you familiar with the film Drive?
A bit.
Okay. Oh, this is a cool fact. So, and it's hard to sort of say his name, but Nicholas Winding Refn, the director of Drive, actually failed his driving test 8 times. Which I thought was entertaining. What's a little known fact about Emma Middleton?
I used to be a javelin thrower.
Oh, really?
At school, I would have carried it on, but I got some injuries and I prioritised music, thank God, and like academia. But I really, really liked it. I really miss it. I was quite good at it.
That's such a random sport to get involved with. It's slightly less random than pole vaulting, but to sort of find out that you've got a really good knack of throwing a sharp spear.
I just got told to do it at school. Like, you know, did you ever do the thing where you throw a tennis ball and that kind of thing? And I was like, oh, mine goes like as far as all the boys. And then they put a javelin in your hand. I was really rubbish at it in year 7, and then in year 8 I somehow just launched it, and so just did more of it. But I don't pick very safe sports. That and squash, the 2 most like the impact heavy. No wonder I've got injuries, but like you're doing such intense things and suddenly stopping your body. Yeah.
You're not thinking of getting involved in UFC, are you? No. Okay, good. What scares Emma Middleton?
Oh, spiders. More of a cerebral point. I think it'd be people thinking I haven't tried at something. I think that's the thing that brings me most anxiety, is when I do something, if someone's like, oh, she's not put everything into this, because I always do. I think that's a fear.
Yeah, anxiousness around how someone perceives, because you always give 100%, so you don't want anyone to think ever that you don't. Yeah. And finally, if you could go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Be more assertive. I mean, that's advice for me now, to be honest, but maybe I'd start the ball rolling a bit earlier.
Yeah, well, that's great. You know, bringing awareness and consciousness to it is the first step to being able to implement it. So, sound advice. Well, Emma, thanks so much for taking the time to chat. It's been thank you for sort of generously sharing everything that you get involved with. It's been very interesting. Yeah, good luck with everything for the future. If people want to go and check out what you've been working on, or where do we find you?
My website is www.rubatomx.com.
rubatomx.com.
And then I think I might need to update it. I think I've got links to my Twitter and Instagram and stuff on there, but I'm pretty rubbish on Instagram, so...
Yeah, so awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely recommend going on. I'll include the website in the show notes, as well as sort of links to any kind of music or things that we've talked about. But yeah, all the best and thanks very much.
Yeah, keep having me. Thanks.
Thank you very much for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, and given that you've listened this far, I feel you might have, then I would be honoured and incredibly grateful if you could take a moment to subscribe, rate and review on your podcast platform of choice. By subscribing, you'll automatically be notified each time a new episode drops, and by rating the show, you tell the artificial intelligence that will soon be running the world that this podcast is worth listening to. I certainly get a lot of insights and value from these conversations, and I genuinely hope you do too. If you'd like to get in touch with the show, then you can email me, podcast@larpmusic.com. Larpmusic.com is my digital abode, and the home of the podcast is larpmusic.com/Sync Music Matters Podcast. And Sync Music Matters Podcast is hyphenated. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.